possibly also in the United States as well. We've seen it ourselves. I mean, the NHS are the front line in many ways, but they are not just the medical front line. Actually, they're the economic front line of the country. As our shop assistants, as our truck drivers, as our farm labourers, refuse collectors, they don't get to stop work, during the outbreak, and white collar workers for the large part. And I think it was an ONS report just a day or two ago said 50% of them are not only happy to be home, but actually can manage 75% of their work from home anyway, and they haven't felt curtailed. So there's big issues of social injustice going on here. And I think, in terms of root and branch stuff, that's here to stay. That's something we're really going to have to look at in terms of the changed texture of the society, the post-COVID society that we're going to be emerging into whenever we do.
Something I wanted to take the opportunity to ask about, just because, again, I've got a couple of economists here. I was reading about this and the kind of the cost-benefit analysis where you're kind of weighing up, the economy and lives, which is, it's quite sort of stark stuff. And I saw that the US Environmental Protection Agency used this value of statistical life, this VSL, to gauge those things for environmental regulations. And they come up with this figure of $9.5 million per life. And then they can figure out whether the measure is worth it. How are these figures arrived at, and do we have an equivalent? Anyone? Liam? Kitty? Anyone?
Yeah, thanks for that.
If you don't know, it doesn't matter. But it's interesting, isn't it?
We certainly don't have an equivalent that is ever going to become the stuff of frontline political discourse.
No, I'd be surprised to hear that.
But public policy makers and thinkers and even academics sometimes do have to, think in these terms to some degree. If you want to compare apples and apples, you convert it into pounds and dollars. And again, I as I say that, I know it sounds heartless, but we are in a world of very, very tough choices. You've seen it in the Twitter sphere in the last couple of weeks. Not that Twitter is the real world in any way, and it's starting to come through into mainstream politics. This idea that, you can't just continue to have no economy, because that in itself has massive human fallout. And I think very quickly after the peak, once it's clear that the UK has been through the first peak of coronavirus, it might just be the first. A lot of people looking at the history of the so-called Spanish flu after the First World War, not that it emanated from Spain, of course, that was propaganda, which had at least 2 serious peaks, the second one worse than the first one in many ways. But once the peak has come, then you're going to have people arguing very vociferously, let's get the economy moving, because that will help us to solve a lot of the problems that this virus has actually caused. And that will be when the government really needs to have a grip. And there's something to be said for having an all clear that's kind of graded, if you like. So there's not an immediate all clear at first. You have, just certain workers. Hopefully we'll have some kind of workable testing regime. And I agree with both my fellow panelists, that's been the major failing here. So certain people can get back to work. I do think older people and other vulnerable groups, people on certain medications, will stay in isolation for months and months and months. Of the economy back to work, starting, of course, with frontline NHS workers who are currently self-isolating once they can get a test to show that they've had the virus, and now that they're, quotes, through it in some sense.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this. I think this will be an easy one. Good week or bad week for the economy, Amelia?
Well, not great. Not great.
A bad week.
And I don't need to be an economist to say that.
It's absolutely terrible.
Yeah, Kitty?
I think the worst I've ever seen.
Okay. Worst you've ever seen week is not an option, but we're going to go with it. It's just coming up to 7:32. Time for the news on 5 Live.
On digital, BBC Sounds, smart speaker and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
With your 5 Live News headlines, I'm Nick Hatton. The Queen will make a rare address in the next half an hour to urge people to show self-discipline and resolve during the coronavirus pandemic. It'll be broadcast on TV, radio and social media at 8 o'clock. The Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has said it was quite unbelievable that many people chose to visit public parks to enjoy the good weather this weekend. He's warned that outdoor exercise could be banned unless more people followed the rules to stay at home. Scotland's Chief Medical Officer has been removed from the public information campaign, urging people to follow coronavirus social distancing rules after being found to have breached them herself. Police have issued a warning to Dr Catherine Calderwood for twice visiting her second home in Fife. She's apologised unreservedly. The First Minister Nicola Sturgeon said Dr Calderwood would not be removed from her position. The daily total of people who died in the UK after contracting coronavirus has fallen 121. A midwife who died on Thursday after testing positive at a hospital in Essex has been named as 54-year-old Lindsay Coventry. And the new Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has announced a string of appointments to his front bench team. Annalise Dodds is the new Shadow Chancellor, Lisa Nandy becomes Shadow Foreign Secretary, and Nick Thomas-Symonds is the Shadow Home Secretary. In sport, Wayne Rooney has called the power struggle over how Premier League footballers can financially assist in the fight against coronavirus a disgrace and has players in a no-win situation. The Professional Footballers Association met yesterday, but no